morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tanzania's president has been sworn in under very tight security. After all the violence and it being clear that this was a one-horse race, we never seem to learn. We keep repeating the same mistake over and over again. The people of Tanzania must be ashamed of what has happened here. There is nothing to be proud of here. As an African, one has got to hold their head in shame, particularly people like us in Zimbabwe, because we have seen this happen for the last 45 years. It's depressing, Ben.
Truly a sad day for democracy. You know, this is, I think, we have to call a spade at some point. When we refer to say Africa is a failed continent, we can give excuses to say it's the West, it's the North, it's the South, and so forth. But this is our problem. We have leadership that has a seared conscience, you know. Instead of celebrating your victory with your people, you're having to do it in a military ground to protect yourself from the people that actually voted for you. I mean, look, 98%, and the number of people that were said to have cast their ballot is over 37 million that you had. That's a lot. So surely, people should be celebrating because the majority won. But now, if you're going to be hiding away from the majority, then who voted for you there? You know, it's pathetic. It's shameful. You're right to say we all as Africans, we need to hang our heads in shame. We are an embarrassment.
Zimbabwe was represented by VP Chiwenga. I don't think Zimbabwe would have been ashamed of what happened there, because Zimbabwe is renowned for doing exactly that. VP Chiwenga himself became VP following the military coup of 2017. That was a democratic process. No one voted. Mugabe woke up one morning with a gun pointing to his temple. And he became the VP. He and Mnangagwa promised that they would hold free, fair, and credible elections. 8 months later, 2018, they went on to blatantly rig the elections. And when people tried to protest, they issued instructions: shoot to kill. And many people were shot dead. And ZANU-PF went on to rig the 2023 elections. The people did not stage any violent protests this time because, for one thing, the opposition promised that they were going to challenge the result in the court of law. The challenge never materialized. However, the most important thing here is we are looking at a situation where history is keeping on repeating itself. The people of Tanzania have had these meaningless elections. And I mean, if you are going to say your main contender is disqualified and the second serious challenge, he or she is also disqualified, and you go ahead with an election, it's a one-man race. And then you turn around and win it. I mean, the whole process becomes totally meaningless. And I think what I find really disappointing here is that we keep repeating the same thing. Zimbabwe has had no free, fair, and credible elections ever since our independence in 1980. And we keep repeating the same thing over and over again. I think this, to me, is what makes it so sickening. When will we ever learn?
I mean, look, Wilbert, the people of Tanzania took a bold step. You know, I believe it was a step in the right direction, where you can see that, you know, from a mile away, that this election is basically meaningless. You know, like you have mentioned, the opposition, they have been, you know, disqualified. Someone is, you know, under, you know, trumped up charges and so forth, you know, making it virtually a one man, you know, show. Elections should mean something at the end of the day. The will of the people. Everybody has a say in their country. That is what is right. There is no one that is, you know, more special than the other. But in Africa, you are finding out that, you know, most elections, except a few, you know, countries that, you know, have shown that democracy does and truly works, you know, most of African countries have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. You know, it's depressing. It's sad, and everybody seems to be, you know, wanting to hide, to say, Let's blame the next guy, let's blame, you know, other countries." We are failing ourselves. I mean, I saw, you know, the SADC observer mission report, and that report is true to what exactly we are reading and what we are seeing. It was a damning report. So now we are finding that it's a damning report after report. Zimbabwe went through the same thing, a damning report. You know, now we have Mozambique, we have, you know, Tanzania. It seems to be growing. The problem that I have now is you have now institutions like the African Union that will sing praise. Oh, congratulations. How can it be congratulations under such conditions? That 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 just shows that, you know, sometimes, you know, it's pointless to belong to organizations like this that are supposed to be protecting the people and the citizens of Africa. Where is the shame when you are congratulating, when you are seeing people being killed? Where is that, you know, shame when you are congratulating people that have been refused a meaningful say. I mean, if you look at the SADC report, it clearly even states that the lines into the polling stations were empty. But then you find somebody will win by 13, 30 something million people. Where did they vote at when the polling stations were empty? And then you stand up and you say, congratulations, with the facts. It's shameful. It's a disgrace. I think, organizations like the African Union, they need to look themselves in the mirror, and really analyze, their appearance. How are they appearing to the world? A shameful embarrassment.
Well, I wanted to respond to Temba's comment there, particularly that people must rise and stop all these dictators. I think it's important that we should know what we can and cannot do. In the case of Zimbabwe, we had the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU. While why did we fail to implement even one token reform? SADC gave us that unique opportunity. People have criticized SADC and the AU, yes, I think with very good reasons. But in 2008, credit where credit is due, SADC turned around and said they were not going to recognize the ZANU-PF regime's victory and forced Mugabe and ZANU-PF to go into the GNU. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms. Not even one token reform was implemented. So to say people must rise and stop these dictators, you are the people, you had the opportunity to stop the dictatorship by making sure the reforms were implemented. The party that you entrusted that task, MDC, failed to implement even one token reform. The people themselves, even to this day, many people out there do not even have a clue what the GNU was about, much less that MDC guys sold out. So the problem is going to lie with the people. What we saw happening in Tanzania these last few weeks with all this violence, some people will say, yes, that's the uprising, that's the youth coming in and demanding change and so forth. The truth of the matter is, you should not have participated in the flawed process, particularly when you're talking of countries like Zimbabwe. Because you've been warned that if you participate, you give the process legitimacy. In the case of Zimbabwe, people believed Chamisa in 2018 when he told them that MDC alliance has got stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. He was lying. 2023, again the same empty promises were made. And again he was lying. After the elections are done, he is the one who comes around and says, oh, the elections were rigged. But this is the very thing that you said would not happen. And some people then say, oh, the youth should go into the street and demonstrate. You gave the regime legitimacy. Now you want to remove it by going to the street. Why did you give it legitimacy in the first place? This is where we keep going round and round in circles, contradicting ourselves. Let's be very clear here. We do not need to participate in flawed elections to give the vote rigging party legitimacy and then try to remove it from power by holding public demonstrations. Stop participating in flawed elections. In fact, to go back to 2008 to 2013, we should have implemented those reforms. And we did not. That is what people of Zimbabwe must learn, and we should learn. What has happened in Mozambique, in Tanzania, Namibia, in many other African countries, other than Botswana in South Africa and Mauritius, most other SADC countries have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections with a consistency that one can say, yes, we are a functioning democracy. That is the problem with Africa. We never seem to learn. We keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And that, to me, is the tragedy of Africa.
One thing that we need to point out is the fight for reforms. It does not start towards an election or during an election. The fight for reforms starts way before that. For example, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe right now, their focus should be on implementing the reforms necessary to get free, fair, and credible elections. We were given recommendations, but up to today, not even one recommendation has been tabled yet implemented. I mean, I will give you an example of what I was reading, from the SADC report about the, elections in Tanzania. The election commission is appointed by the president. And once that commission announces the results, there is no coming back. You cannot challenge it, whether in court or wherever. It's a done deal. Now, if you are going to be the one who appoints judges, the commission itself, how then do you lose when it's your people? It's not rocket science. The election is already flawed at that point. Why would you want to even start campaigning when you know that the election is flawed? They had a lot of time to go and challenge these aspects and get them fixed before any election. This is where the problem is. We want to do it on the eve of battle. It won't work. The time will not afford you, that luxury. The fight for reforms, for example, in Zimbabwe, should have started a long time. But guess what? We are busy fighting 2030. Even if we were to win the 2030, 2028 will surely be rigged. So we have not done anything. So we are also partly to blame because we are sitting on a minefield, but we are busy digging elsewhere instead of getting ourselves out of this mess. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that we seem to, like you said, go round and round in circles, participate or not participate, but ignore what needs to be done. For years, we've been given a recommendation: fix this, fix that, fix this, fix that. Nobody talks about it. Only after we have done the deed, we start singing and crying, they're rigged, they're rigged, they're rigged. Who didn't know? We all knew, because nothing has changed. It's a pity. It's a pity.
Well, you referred to Dr. Nevas Mumba's report on Zimbabwe. For those of you who may not be aware of it, here is what Dr. Mumba said.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me be clear that the changing of any dynamic or situation in any of our African countries is a preserve of the citizens of that country, in this case, the Zimbabwean people. An election observation team goes there to support the process by observing and being able to release a statement of our observations. That, for instance, in Zimbabwe, we raised several issues of transparency and also the independence of the Electoral Commission and things which happen in many other countries, But at the end of the day, once we produce the report and make it available to the Zimbabwean authorities and eventually to the Zimbabwean people, it really remains the preserve of the Zimbabwean people to fight for the freedoms that they need themselves and to correct those issues that have been observed. The reason why we have multiple observation missions is to ensure that, there is a comparison, taking place between the SADC report and the European Union report, the African Union report. And then they can see that those issues that repeat themselves in all these reports, it's up to the Zimbabwean people. And this is where I appeal to all political leaders, not only in Zimbabwe, especially the elections that are coming in Mozambique, that are coming in South Africa, in DRC. We have to make up our minds that, look, at the end of the day, once the people in the country are given an opportunity to monitor the elections, because they also monitor, it starts not during the day of the elections. They must make sure that the constitutional lacunas that can affect a good election are dealt with months before the election. And they must fight to ensure that there's a level playing field. They should never wait for the time when the election is taking place. They must also insist that the electoral commissions and the governments in those countries abide by international norms in holding democratic elections. And this fight must be more vicious before the election comes.
That could not be any clearer. So to my friend Temba there, if we are serious about ending this ZANU-PF dictatorship, we must fight for those reforms now. And in fact, to be quite honest, we are now looking at 3 years before the next elections. I don't think there will be any reforms implemented. So we can work on the correct assumption that there will be no meaningful reforms implemented before 2028. What shall we do then? Do not participate in the process, because if you do participate in a flawed process in your millions, you give the process legitimacy. I repeat, do not participate in a flawed process, because if you do, you give the process legitimacy. In 2018, people participated because Chamisa told them that MDC Alliance had stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. He lied. In 2023, he again lied to them, telling them that I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. ZANU-PF is not going to rig these elections. And he even posted a few days before the elections that MDC, Triple C was going to win big. And he, Chamisa, was already preparing his cabinet.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifo iri. Plan ya Mwari haifo iri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
Well, he was lying. And people participated in those flawed elections. And I'm sure if he had not promised that he was going to have a court challenge, we too could have had violent protests to protest the results. All to no avail. We need to learn the lesson. That point cannot be overemphasized. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
Failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections will only mean that you will have to deal with an angry mob and eventually a military coup. And with all these things, destruction of infrastructure always accompanies. So you will find that you are not only taking the country, backwards, but you are endangering lives and your own life at that matter. Africa has failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections, except for a very few countries that have shown that it can be done. And I must say, those countries that have done it are very successful. They have a happy community. They have a healthy and functioning economy. The fight for reforms for those countries that are failing has to start today. We have to put our foot down today and make strides to achieve that, a democratic process at the end of the day. It's pointless to be crying or wanting to act on the day, and in Zimbabwe's case, after the election. It's already a done deal. So I urge that, we take this seriously and we fix what needs to be fixed today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much for those who were able to join us tonight. I hope you'll be able to do it again. Same time, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. And we also are on air on Saturday and Sunday. And for those sessions, you're welcome to join us on the platform to discuss the various issues of the day. The link, you can copy it there. We don't change that link. We use the same link every week. So if you log in on StreamYard on that link, you'll be able to join us. And I hope one of these days you will be able to do that. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Have a good night.